Good morning, afternoon, and evening, Blood Bowl fans. Today we will talk about some important figures in the world of Blood Bowl. Names that have become synonymous with the game, for better or for worse. And there is no better name, or in this case, names, that represent what people think when they think of Blood Bowl than the two commentators, ever present through Cabal Vision, to give you the commentary that enhances the experience. Bob Bifford and Jim Johnson. These two are a staple of every Blood Bowl match. So let's look a little at, how they got their positions. Firstly, we'll start with Bob. Bob Bifford, also known as The Beef, started his career in 2438, and during the same year, he won a medal for the best newcomer. And that medal made him think. And you might consider this a joke, but it isn't. For Bob is smarter and more charismatic than your regular ogre. Which isn't that hard, to do, but it's still something. So after he taught a little, he became a free agent. He was willing to play for anybody, but not everybody was willing to hire him. 1 year later, he would get hired by the Hochland Lumberjacks, and single-handedly, he took them from the last position to the 4th spot in their league. And as you can imagine, now the offers came left and right. Bob had no preference for what race he played as long as he played. And during his on-the-field career, he won multiple medals and awards, including 2 Blood Bowl medals. But at some point, he decided to retire because he wanted more out of the sport than just being a player. As it happens with some former athletes as well. And, at some point, Bob and Jim would be hired to co-host the Orchidas Team of the Year. Their performance during that show found immediate success and launched them into their current stardom position of being unmissable at any Blood Bowl match. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This was Bob. Let's talk about Jim now. Jim didn't have an illustrious career as Bob. In fact, he didn't play at all. He was a bookkeeper that kept track of all the casualties in the game. Mainly those of Bob Bifford. It's a classic sports commentary match made in heaven. The former athlete and the smug commentator who exchange funny lines and bring interesting insight to the game and to day-to-day life. Some exchanges you can hear right now.
Good evening to all you Cabal Vision viewers out there in the old world and beyond. I hope your crystal ball is fully charged. If not, find yourselves a wizard and chain him to it. Because the 25-13 season promises to be one hell of a show, doesn't it, Bob?
It sure does. Oh, and iron, Jim.
Iron what, Bob? Your shirt?
Chains, Jim. Iron chains for chaining up your wizard. Iron is best. It's harder to enchant than steel or silver. Oh, and don't forget to break their fingers as well.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, fascinating. And we may come back to that later.
Now that we have that out of the way, let's look at another important figure in Blood Bowl. You probably know him, maybe even supported one of his teams, or drank his beer, or even went to one of his bars. That's Joseph Bugman, the most famous dwarf out there, renowned for his face being on billboards everywhere. A man that is synonymous with Blood Bowl like a goblin is with being a cheating git. For you see, Bugman owns numerous teams, and from time to time, he makes his appearance at their matches. Which, as you can imagine, is a spectacle to behold, but that is nothing compared when he is the coach of said team. You see, Joseph Bugman is one of those rare cases where a coach is also a player. Sure, in his case, it's after his team is losing and he consumed ample quantities of his own brew. Nevertheless, he goes on the field to play himself. While in certain occasions, he was also part of the cheerleading squad. Again, after consuming ample quantities of his own brew. Which, okay, let's be honest, it happens more times than not. At this point, it might just be a regular occurrence for him to do it. But, there's always a but, despite that, he is an amazing coach that can follow the game and make the proper decisions, as long as he thinks he doesn't need to take matters into his own hands. On the pitch, he's one of the best players out there, and nobody can really deny his skills in playing Blood Bowl are as good as his skills in brewing. And since we're talking about dwarves, let's not forget to mention one of the most important dwarves in the history of Blood Bowl, or I guess dwarf in the history of Blood Bowl, Roselle, the first league commissioner of the game. But to get there, we have to go through a history lesson. The world was filled with strife. Everyone fought everyone. Until one day, two armies, one of dwarves and one of orcs, stumbled upon some ancient texts in a weirdly looking battlefield. The two races wanted to know what those texts meant, the tomes, everything. And so, both races had different ideas what those were. The dwarves thought it was something left by the ancestors, while the orcs thought it was from Gork and Mork. Nevertheless, they encountered a bit of a problem. They couldn't read anything. And so they went to find somebody that could read to them what those texts meant. Now, depending on who you ask, this search either took months or days. But they found a dwarf that could translate the text. It would take the dwarf known as Roselle 3 days to decipher it, and tell the two factions that it was the holy text of the god Nuffle. Of course, he starts a cult after this, whose whole job was translating and documenting the holy text of Nuffle so they could respect the rights left to them by the god. Following his death, of course, unfortunately, 3 more commissioners would follow. The first one isn't really worth mentioning, but the second one, George Hellhound, is of some importance. Mostly because he would sell more tickets than people were willing to come see the matches. Indeed, that wasn't such a good financial decision. So he contacted the guilds of magic to find a way to transmit the game in the whole world. And, as you can imagine, this is how Camera and Cabal Vision were invented. Hellhound is also credited with the invention of the player's name being on the jersey, so they can distinguish the dead bodies at the end of the game, of course. And I said that 3 more would follow? Well, the third and final commissioner was Nick Treehorn, a controversial figure in the world of Blood Bowl. Firstly, for the Astrogranite controversy, where to replace the grass, or lack thereof, for the underworld denizens, because they couldn't really grow the holy grass of Nuffle, they come up with Astrogranite, a substance that did not require the care of grass, but in all honesty, it was just rocks. Of course, many teams asked for the substance to be changed, because, well, armor broke more easily on it, balls bounced differently, people were hurt worse on it, the usual. But the NAF commented that we welcome it as yet another exciting development in making our great game even more fun. Of course, it's merely a coincidence that the owner of the company that created Astrogranite was also Nick Treehorn. Another controversy was the one regarding Morgan Thorg and his induction into the Hall of Fame despite being an active player. And one of the requirements is for the player to be, retired. But somehow, he got in, which caused uproar among the fans and the players. Who knows, maybe one day Bob will be in the Hall of Fame too. We can only hope. But these 2 controversies pale in comparison to his biggest one. During the Blood Bowl final of 2489, Nick would leave the whole treasury of the NAF and the Darkside Cowboys cheerleaders. He would just vanish with them. And this sent the NAF into chaos. Teams were disbanded or they had to sell their stadiums just to continue existing. And as you can imagine, this brought the collapse of the NAF. Of Nick, there have been many sightings of him, but no one has ever really truly seen him, like a ghost or honorable lawyer. But as the game itself, Nuffle give it and Nuffle take it. And so too did he with the NAF. Now since we're talking about Nuffle, let's look at not an figure in this case, but, what's it called? An organization, an association. Because while Nuffle is the god that everybody adores, there are some that do not share the same sentiment. The most clear example is the NBA, the Nuffle Blasphemers Association. This association was started by Torg the Blasphemer after his team, Torg's Terminators, were so close to winning a match until his star player and ball carrier tripped over the end zone and broke his neck. The opposing team managed to capture the ball and win the match. That's what made Torg start this association. The NBA numbers players and coaches that have grown tired of Nuffle's fickleness. You can recognize them from their long robes and their blaspheming signs. But most rational and sane fans ignore them for the lunatics that they are. And these have been the important figures in Blood Bowl history. Plus, the addition of what to do when you see the NBA. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next one.